Hi everyone, I'm Peter Jones. I run the Whamcloud engineering team at DDM, and I'm talking to you today on behalf of the OpenSFS Lustre working group. And I've been working on the Lustre project for over 15 years now in a variety of roles through different companies. And I've had the great pleasure of attending the Japan Lug event in the past, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to be involved in this event today, albeit virtually. So to get started, I'm going to talk about the LTS releases. So the graphic at the bottom shows the data from the Lustre Community Survey, which compiles the versions that are being used in production across the last 3 years and shows those as a percentage to allow year-on-year comparisons despite fluctuations in the number of respondents. And you can see the pattern fairly clearly is that over the years, the numbers drop for a given version in percentage terms for a given release. Obviously, as people take older systems out of service or upgrade to newer releases, there's strong coalescence around each LTS release, and the one exception to the rule of diminishing over time is with the current LTS release, where you see the percentages increasing over time with the 2.12 release. So this really shows the importance of the LTS releases across the community. Most of the vendors offering Lustre solutions make their versions based on the LTS releases. And of course, those are the default releases in most cases that people will choose if they're just using Lustre for whatever purpose. So to get into specifics, the Lustre 2.12.7 release went out in July of this year. And at the time I'm recording this video, the Lustre 2.12.8 release is in release testing. I hope it's already GA by the time the event takes place, but if it isn't, then no doubt it'll be available soon. This release will be first to offer support for Red Hat 8.5 clients, and I will move on to talk further about the LTS releases. As I mentioned previously, they're very significant to the community as to which one we're using. And unlike some projects where there's a much larger community, to simplify things, they have fixed pre-published dates and timelines for switchovers. We have had a more practical approach for a community of our size, where we have more discussion and a collaborative process before we decide it's an appropriate time to switch over. And that can depend on things like certain features being ready and other related things that may be taking place with various Linux distributions, say. And that's definitely proven to be very useful for us. Most recently, with the recent changes around CentOS, that's meant that we were able to adjust with our timing to sort of better accommodate, to allow people to make plans who were previously using CentOS to consider some other options. So the 2.15 release is not out yet, but I'll talk a bit more about the timing on a later slide. The point of us announcing it ahead of the actual release is it gives time for stakeholders to test the pre-release versions of the code ahead of the actual GA, and gives us time to fix any issues that are found and mean that the release can be better suited right from the initial release for people's usage. So as we were finding in the surveys as part of our consultation process, there's definitely still some people who would prefer we didn't make a move and would rather stay on 2.12 longer. I still think for those people, there are options that mean that they can be well catered for. There will, of course, be some period of months where before the 2.15 release is available, and then some transition period where we will offer updates for both 2.12 and 2.15, as we did when we switched from 2.10 to 2.12. But more prominently, the interop between the 212 and 215 means that people could choose to update their clients to be 215 and still use their 212 servers for a longer period and get a lot of the benefit with much less disruption to their services. And of course, with the permissive open source license of Lustre, people have the flexibility to be able to make changes to 212 and to adjust it as they need, regardless of what the broader community are doing. So to talk about the major releases of Lustre, so the 2.14 release went GA in February of this year. So this release has a number of useful features, and my own personal favorite here being the client-side data encryption. This is where leverages the kernel's FS script capability to be able to have users use their key to be able to encrypt data, and only users with that key are able to read the contents of the file subsequently. This release has been started to be used fairly broadly. DDN have got the Exascaler 6 release based on this, and it has been going out to a number of customers. The contributions to this release are shown here in terms of the number of code change commits that went in. As you can see, there's a number of different organizations involved in that activity, and I will make a special point of drawing attention to Google, as though that was the first contribution to my knowledge we've had from them that came in with this release. Moving on to the 2.15 release, which is the one we're actively working on at the moment. This release will have Red Hat 8.5 servers as the primary distribution that we focus our testing on. It is targeted for this year still, the end of this year, but it is possible it may slip into the new year depending on how long it takes to complete all the testing and bug fixing, etc. we want to do. But so there are some additional features, some performance improvements, some further encryption work, including the encryption of the actual file name as well as the file contents in this release. But I think that for most people, the newer kernel support and knowing that this is going to be the release that will have the stream of updates will be what will draw people to use this release ahead of other options. And on the right here, you see the graphical Lustre roadmap, which shows what the information I just laid out roughly in timelines, and looking forward to the 2.16 release, which will be about a year out from now, and showing the switch over to the LTS release there. And finally, I'd like to talk just about community events. There's a number that we have throughout the year that we enjoy in different regions. And unfortunately this year, although some of them did make attempts to have in-person events, we have ended up with all of them being virtual. The virtual events are really great to allow us to kind of still keep connected as a community. And there are, often there can be higher level of participation. But I do hope that in 2022, we do get the opportunity to meet physically in person. And I think that leads to a fuller sort of exchange, and there's a lot more benefits around that. And then finally, the graphic here shows analysis of Lustre usage in the top 100 of the top 500.org lists. So we've got data here going back to SC10 right up until the very recent list for SC21. And basically, we've looked at compiled data about file system usage across all the top 100 sites in each of those lists over the years, talking to the people involved in the deployment or operating at the site, and to understand what file system they're using. And the red line shows the number of the percentage of the top 100, of the actual top 100, and the blue graph shows the numbers of the top 10. So you can see, fairly consistently a very, high proportion, maybe over the top 100, roughly 2/3 or so, that have been using Lustre over a pretty lengthy period here. So I think that's a testimony to how well Lustre has continued to focus on the most demanding, IO needs that people have on the planet. Anyway, that's all I had with my presentation. I hope you found it useful, and I wish you all the very best for the rest of your JLUG. Thanks very much. Bye now.